I'm just doing the basic introduction. So, Keres Manor. What would you do for $1 million? There was a man. Let's call him Timothy. One day, Timothy was living his regular life. He had everything. He had his family, his parents, I should say. He had his computer, he had his figures. But eventually his parents got tired of him, and so they kicked him out onto the streets. Told him to go get a job, get a life. And Timothy, not yet being accustomed to the way the world worked, decided that, screw that. I'm gonna go make my own way. I'm gonna live on the streets. I'm gonna be a man of a rugged demeanor. And so he did his best to do just that. And he found it a lot harder than he was expecting. Food was often scarce and, he found that life was a lot harder when you eventually do give up. Because you see, after living on the streets for about a month, he had given up. He attempted to go get a job, because that's what you do when you need money. And, begging on the street isn't really doing it for you. But the thing is that, at that point, he didn't have a way to clean himself. Didn't have a car. Didn't have a way to get to work. And worse still, he was living in a parking garage. And that's not really good for your employees' morale. And so he resorted to other tactics. Eventually, finding a relatively sufficient one, he'd go down to the dump, or go down and pick up litter, or trash, that he thought might be somewhat valuable. He'd go to the river and he'd clean it off and wash it out and he'd pawn it off for a little bit of cash here and there. And one day, while searching this wasteland of a junkyard, he came across a small radio. This radio that was actually pretty clean already. Yes, it was scuffed here or there, but it still had some of that plasticky shine. And as far as he could tell, all it needed was a few batteries. Now normally he'd pawn this off and sell it for what he would assume would be a pretty decent price. But instead, he decided, wait, this could be a possible source of entertainment. I mean, I haven't had anything to do since I got kicked out of home. And so he went to sell his stuff at the pawn shop that night, and decided to actually use some of his cash to buy some batteries for it. And so he did. With a pair of batteries in hand and a radio in his little shopping cart, he returned back to his little hideaway in the parking garage. Excitedly, he used a piece of plastic to unscrew the back and popped the little battery in, closed it up, and turned it on. And there was static. He figured, I guess that's fair. I'm just not on the right frequency. So he switched through the channels, up and down the little slider. Come on. There's gotta be something. Anything, really. Just, even if it's like some sort of like Bible readout channel. Please, just something. And he kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And he scrolled lower than he's ever scrolled before. Down to about 300 hertz. And once he reached that point, there was silence on the radio. The static was gone.
Hello there.
Came a voice from the radio.
Are you looking for some thrills?
And it paused, as if awaiting a response. He just kind of looked at it. What in the world?
Maybe some chills.
Another pause. What in the world?
Maybe some dollar bills.
At this point, Tim chuckled at the little rhyme. Thrills, chills, and dollar bills. Some stupid spelling scheme that seems to just... well...
Oh, I see I've got your attention now, do I? Well, if that's the case, then come on down to Keres Manor, down in Ringtown, Pennsylvania. Spend one night here and win $1 million.
He was taken aback. What? $1 million for spending the night at some manor house? What is it, some sort of horror story thing? Some sort of cliche? Spend a night in a house and get $1 million. Of course.
Yes, it's true, it's true. Though it may seem too good to be, we promise you spend one night in Keres Manor, and you'll be paid $1 million the next morning.
That was bizarre. He was baffled. He looked down the radio and... is this for real?
I assure you, all you listeners out there, that this is the most real thing you have ever seen in your life. Just come on down to Ringtown, Pennsylvania, and take residence up at Keres Manor.
And with that, little radio repeated itself.
Are you out there looking for for thrills?
And so he turned it off. Ringtown isn't too far away from here. That's, what, a short train ride away? Yeah. I could make it down to Ringtown. It's definitely something I could do. And so with that, with a new spring in his step, he went to bed. I mean, after all, he had been hunting trash the entirety of the day. But the next morning, he awoke with joy and hope in his heart. He quickly got up and caught the nearest train, riding it down 1, 2, 10, 50 miles down to Ringtown, Pennsylvania. The trip took most of the day itself, him getting there around 6 o'clock. So the sun would be setting in roughly an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And so he began walking around and asking the locals, hey, do you know where this Keres Manor is? Or, sorry, Keres Manor. That's the one. Keres Manor? That's not a place you want to be going, son. What's so bad about it? We here are the locals. We avoid that place. Been abandoned for a few years. With this, he got a little worried. It's been abandoned, huh? Yeah, but occasionally we'll see people go in. They don't tend to walk out, though. Kind of strange, I'll be honest. They don't... Well, what else did I have to lose? Well, if that's really how you feel, son, it's just down the way. Walk down to 12th Street and take a left. Thanks. And with that, he strode down the street, walking until eventually this gleaming, shining white building came into his view. The lawns were pristinely manicured, the bushes cut to a perfect 90 degrees, the building itself clean and polished. Really? This place has been abandoned for years? Seems a little bit of a mistake. Maybe the groundskeeper still lives here. And so he walked. And he walked. And he got to the gates, which were wide open, might I add. He walked down the lawns, the streets, the pathways. until he reached the door. The large mahogany, polished door with the large brass knocker. He grabbed it.
Yes? How can we help you?
I'm told that this place offers you $1 million if you stay the night.
Oh, yes. Come on in. We do still offer that deal.
And yes, these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities don't come very often, do they?
Once in a lifetime. You can stay here as often as you like, son.
He paused again. As often as you like? Maybe he could turn this into a more reliable source of income. After all, he wasn't really much of one to get scared. Okay, well, are there any rules I should know about, or?
Not really, just that, well, everything locks at sunset.
Oh, the outside at least. Oh, fair enough. I mean, if you have to stay the night, you have to ensure that they stay the entire night, don't you?
Exactly. Thank you for understanding.
And the door opened, revealing to him this grand entryway. 2 double staircases going up, a large door between them, and a fountain in the center of the room. This fountain bubbling out the cleanest, most shining water. The voice, as it turns out, came from a little speaker next to the knocker, which he hadn't noticed when he first took a look. Inside, he didn't see anyone, besides this gleaming, shining entryway and oh, that wonderful smell. He followed it and found a full table covered from end to end in gloriously steaming cooked food. Excitedly, he ran up to it and stopped for a second. Is it okay if I eat this? No response. And so he figured, why not? Began eating. It was amazing. The flavors all mixed so well, and yet they were also very distinct and individual. These things, well, he found them to be interesting. Really? $1 million to stay in a place like this? How bad can it be? Man, I'm gonna love the rest of my life for certain. At least if I'm allowed to stay here more than once. With that, he ran upstairs to this grand bathroom, the tub inlaid in the floor, taking up half the room itself. Things were so clean, and yet the water was still steaming. A nice, warm, bubbly steam. He went and he laid down into the bath and felt all the grime and muck leave his body, cleansing him, likely the first bath he'd received in ages. And so he found himself in ecstasy. After roughly maybe 4 to 5 minutes in the bath, which, may I mention, the water didn't cool down, it remained the same nice warm temperature. He climbed out, dripping wet, his body now clean. He found robes hanging up against the wall, and with the towels next to them. He took a towel and dried off his hair, whipped it around, and looked at himself in the mirror. Yeah, you're one good-looking guy. Especially now that you thinned up a little bit. Tossed the towel off to the side and threw on the robe. It was the softest silk, Truly something only for the rich and the famous. With that, he began to devise a little bit of a strategy for surviving the night. He figured, well, if I just lock myself in a room, none of those horrible things can get at me. Well, there aren't even any horrible things here. The place is clean and empty. So he went and he found a room nearby the exit that has a lock. That had a lock. 2, actually. 3, 4. That's a lot of locks. Hey. He opened it up and he walked inside and closed the door, locking everything. From the door handle to the deadbolt to the 2 chains. This little room had nothing but a bed, a dresser, and a window. He went and he approached the bed, laying down in its nice, soft, cushioned mattress. Oh, this was truly heaven. He looked out the window off to the side, and just as the sun dipped below the horizon, and it was silent. Hadn't there been sound here before? Yes, surely. The fountain had been running. Well, I mean, it makes sense that they turned the water off. I mean, nobody's even here to appreciate it. Whatever. I'll just catch him, shut-eye. That's just what he did. He wrapped himself up in the covers and gave a big old sigh of relief as he sunk into unconsciousness. He woke with a start. What had woken him up? Was it the heat? Oh boy, these blankets were heavy. Kicked them off. It was still so warm. Oh man. Waking up to the heat's the worst. And he heard something. What in the world? Oh, right. It's the radio. He went and dug through his little bag off to the side and pulled it out. The little thing had somehow turned on. Static ringing out through the speakers. He figured, why not? Just, well, just turn it on. Or rather, turn it back to the station it was at before. Turned the dial down, 300 hertz. Silence. 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 Wasn't it bad radio etiquette to have dead air? Huh. Does this stupid thing even work? Oh, I assure you it does. A shiver was sent down his spine in that moment. What? I assure you, we can hear you. We can see you, too. This has got to be some sort of prank. Oh, we assure you, no pranks here. Simply reality. So hard. With that, he noticed something else. There was a light protruding from the door. What the? Casting a soft, warm yellow glow out across the little room he was in. Waving softly. What in the? He went over and unbolted the door. Opened it up and what he saw frightened him. The whole building was on fire. He threw the radio off to the side and wondered, what's going on here?
It's your damnation, son.
What the? He bolted, ran down the stairs, over to the door. But he didn't make it to the door. As the stairs gave out from underneath him, the wood creaking and smashing and cracking. He fell, and he slammed his shoulder against the ground and hit his head. He stood up, dazed. Right, I gotta get to the door. I gotta get out of here. And he ran to the door, to the front door. Let me out. I gotta get out of here. He threw his shoulder against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. It didn't budge. Wait, heat rises, doesn't it? The basement. He ran over to the basement door. What he assumed was the basement door. Threw it open, and surely enough, there were stairs leading downwards. He ran down them, stumbling halfway through. The stone steps warm to the touch. And yet the lower he got, the hotter it seemed to become. Lower, lower, lower. The light was slowly fading, though, which was a good sign. It means there's no fire down here. Eventually, he reached the bottom, and there was nothing but a red void beneath. Unable to stop himself, he stumbled, and the railing seemed to disappear as he fell. Lower, lower. He woke in the room. The blankets wrapped around him, but they didn't seem to do anything. It was so very cold. What the? It was just sweltering in here. He wrapped the blankets tighter around himself. Thankfully, this time it was silent. No radio static to be heard at all. Well, actually, there was one sound. The tapping. The scratching at the walls. The wall next to him. The one that led to the hallway outside. Scratch. 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 He went and unlocked one and the other and opened it. After all, the scratching was in the hallway, not near the door. He left the chains locked, though, thankfully. Peered outside. The lobby was covered in ice and fog and darkness. He quickly closed the door and relocked everything. Nope, not gonna deal with that. I'm just gonna go back to bed. And so he did just that. Laid back down and he rested his head against the frigid, icy pillow. The scratching slowly fading off, just as he passed back into oblivion. Into the nothingness. He woke again once more with a start. A thrumming music rupturing through the door, filling his room with its this large pumping melody, blasting through every fiber, every strut of the building. Lights flashing under the door. He got up and he walked towards the door and opened it. There was lights shining everywhere, and there was music playing ever so loud, and the lobby was full of people. Dancing, drinking, doing other less appropriate things against the walls. He had stumbled himself into a rave. Hey, it's like all the days back in high school. He walked out and closed the door behind him. No stupid radio to get his way this time. When he walked down the stairs, feeling like a movie star. Though nobody really seemed to pay him much attention. They were all off in their own little worlds. Either way, he walked down to the fountain. Walked down to the fountain, which appeared to be flowing some sort of a booze or wine or something. He didn't care. Grabbed a cup and filled it up and took a sip. Felt his consciousness get a little cloudy. Classic intoxication. We love brave juice. And so he walked and he danced. And he hung out with other people there, though none of them really seemed to pay him much heed. As a matter of fact, other than some vague grunts and nods whenever he greeted or tried to talk to somebody, there was nothing. People just seemed to ignore him. Just like high school. Yeah. And so when he sat down against the fountain, despite there being a lot of people here, I still feel alone. Only I had somebody of my own. But that's never gonna happen. And with that, it all went silent. And the people were gone. Only left was the clatter on the ground and the occasional light. What the... With that, he found himself wondering, what in the world? So loud just a second ago.
Hello, sir.
Oh no.
Do you know what this is?
Do I want to know?
This is humanity's filth. Your filth.
What in the world? Just then, the fountain stopped flowing its effervescent liquid. And a gurgling sound began emanating from it. A few seconds later, a black sludge began pouring out, filling the basin, not draining, but filling the fountain. Quickly backed away. What in the world? Just then it dawned on him how gross this room was. There were stains on the carpet. The walls were no longer pearly white, they were a mucky grey. There was stains even on the walls of red, of brown, of white. And so he backed away and was very careful not to touch the walls as the fountain began overflowing. I gotta get to higher ground. He ran towards the stairs, but some of the sludge had gotten in his way and he accidentally took a step. It burned. It clung to him and it burned. Ah! He limped as he ran up the stairs. Whatever sludge eating away at his pant leg and his shoe. Or what he had left of his shoe. He went and he closed the door and he locked the locks and he pressed himself up against the window. trying to get it open, trying to escape this place. Before long, the gurgling sludge came bubbling out from underneath the door, came across the floor. It filled up the room ever so slowly, filling all the cracks and all the creases. And soon, it engulfed him entirely. And he woke again. Once more in the cold. That frigid cold. Had it gotten colder? His breath plumed out in front of him in these big old puffs of mist. Come on. Come on. He got up and he gave tired, frigid jumping jacks. Warm up. Come on. And then he heard it again. This time, against the door. A finger. Cold and blackened and frostbitten up to the nail, and far beyond, stuck itself through the door. Retracted, and soon an eye peeked through the hole. He pulled himself into the covers, hiding as well as he could. What in the world? The eye itself was yellow, with a slit that went the wrong direction. What? He dared not peek out from underneath the covers, for he knew that if he did, it would see him. And soon he found himself succumbing to his tiredness, or possibly succumbing to the hypothermia. Both possibilities were plausible in this case. And he woke again. It was a sudden jolt, a zap. But this time he woke in a chair. Strapped to it, in fact. In a plain, white room. With nothing but diodes attached to his arms. There was nothing in this room but him in the chair. The walls were bare, no doors, no windows. No speakers. And yet even still the voice came protruding through again.
And you know what this is, son? Son of Adam.
Is it boredom?
Close, you could say that. No, this, my friend, is your isolation. Your true hell. Your loneliness incarnate.
Oh, that all, huh? He felt his spirit fade. He felt himself becoming less than a human. Merely an entity trapped within this space and time. For every time he began to doze off to sleep, a bolt of electricity jolted him back awake, shooting pain through his body as he was alone. And then he saw it. One thing hooked to the wall in front of him. a key. A key that he could never reach, for he was stuck there in his chair. He screamed out into the nothingness, into the void that he was now trapped in. This room, this empty room, that was both infinitely large and so very claustrophobic. He laid there, or sat there rather, getting so close to sleep and yet being jolted and ripped away from it every single time he sat there. Jolt. 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 Till eventually his tiredness overcame him after what felt like months or even years. Jolt after jolt, and his body just gave out until the final jolt. One that shot through his body. He could smell himself frying from the inside out. Steam, or smoke rather, leaving his nostrils and his ears as his brain simply ceased. And he awoke one last time in the cold. He looked at his fingers. They were blue, very nearly black, and he couldn't feel them any longer. The ice had crept out through the now open door from the lobby. The fog filled his room as the ice crept across the floor in the room. And he heard it once more, scratching. And so he heard the scratching from underneath the bed. This time so much closer than anything ever before. Then a hand reached out overwards, a blackened, frost-bitten cold hand. And soon a head emerged as well. Something that was just as frostbitten and dead as the rest of it. Hair barely clinging to what's left of its ruptured scalp. As it climbed over, put itself above him. This creature, he assumed, had a feminine shape. "Thank you for coming," it said as it dug its nails into his chest. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It pressed its hand up against his face, and he could feel the heat, at least what was left of it, being drained out of him. So this is how I die, is it? But just then, light entered through his window. A warmth that he had never known before. Sunlight as he had never known it. Blessed, gracious sunlight. If he had been able to cry with his frozen tear ducts, he would have. Thank goodness. Oh. come again soon, dearie. It said as he succumbed to his injuries and finally passed into complete unconsciousness. And he awoke the next morning in his parking garage, covered in burns, in frostbite, in charred electricity, in bits of flesh that was blackened by what appeared to be a sticky, icky muck. And yet, there was a package on the ground that contained $1 million in cash. And with that, Timothy decided that that is something that he would not do for $1 million. But he was going to use the results of his agony to pull himself back together. He used the money to go buy a house and a car. He spent what left of it to get a job after, of course, extensive amounts of surgery to repair his damaged functions. And so, Timothy told his tale. Soon he went back out of that place, now a somewhat successful businessman. He threw a sign over the gate, something that was needed more than anything. The sign read, "Inside lies damnation. Is what you're doing really worth it?" And he knew in his heart that no matter what it was, it in fact wasn't worth it. No matter what the evil incarnate offered. The end. The fog filled his room. I'm telling a story! Okay, sorry.